Welcome back to the post-lunch session. The topic for this session is Governance in Focus, Making Boards Future Ready. I would now like to invite the moderator for the session, Mr. Dhaval Gadani, Head of Governance and CS, HSBC Australia and New Zealand. Mr. Dhaval Gadani has over 16 years of experience in banking and financial service sector, predominantly in corporate governance, superannuation, investments, and wealth management sectors. I now welcome the panelists for the session as well. Ms. Lucinda McCann, Partner Norton Rose Fulbright, Australia. Ms. Lucinda has experience in governance and risk, superannuation, funds management, financial services, and prudential and conduct regulation. She is known by her clients for her strategic advice on their most important regulatory and risk issues through her unique perspective and critical judgment acquired through her previous roles in a leading regulator, in-house and private house. I now invite Dr. Sudhendra Putti, Associate Vice President and CS Cyient Limited. Dr. Sudhendra Putti is a seasoned expert in corporate governance and ESG with nearly 25 years of experience across government, private, and non-private sectors. He leads the corporate governance, secretarial, and ESG functions at Cyient Limited, a global technology company. Last but not the least, I invite Mr. Dinesh Makani, founder and director, IBS Group. CS Dinesh Makani is the founder-director of IBS Group, a next-gen business solutions firm offering corporate, financial, and legal services across India and Australia. He brings over 25 years of experience across diverse sectors, including food, retail, hospitality, and IT. I now hand over the session to the moderator of the session, Mr. Dhaval Gadani.
Thank you, Priyanka ji. Namaskar, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dhaval Gadani, and I am privileged and I feel honored and I thank the ICSI team to give me the honor to moderate this session covering governance in focus, making the boards future ready. I'm honored to share the space with distinguished guests, Dr. Patti, Ms. McCann, and Mr. Makani. Let's just get into it. I mean, post-lunch, can't get any exciting than this, right? We are discussing a fantastic subject. And a very good morning, by the way, to our attendees from India. So in today's rapidly changing environment, making boards future ready is no longer a choice. It's an imperative. The role of governance professionals is evolving. And so too is the expectation of boards to be resilient, agile, and forward-looking. That said, I would look at my fellow panelists here, so Dr. Patti, Lucinda, and Dinesh. If I may ask you to share your opening comments and to share your views on when you hear the word future ready board, rather the phrase future ready board, what does that mean to you? Maybe Dr. Patti.
Very good afternoon to all of you here, and a good morning to all those tuning in from India. I'm deeply honored to be speaking here from this August conference. Thanks to the ICSI for having me here and for continuously getting these overseas events done. The theme, as was broadly mentioned, is around the future of boards, or getting boards future ready and where they are headed to. There is a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to a fortune. This is what Shakespeare said in Julius Caesar. And the tide and the flood that we are talking of today, in the context of corporate boards, is governance, innovation, disruption, and artificial intelligence, just to name a few. The future of boards lies in understanding, unraveling, navigating, and maneuvering themselves through this quagmire, if I may call it so, and ensuring that business goes on as usual. We live in a VUCA world, and each letter of this phrase is being reiterated by the hour, by the minute, by the day. Global uncertainties are a reality of life. The threat of looming wars is real. It's getting exacerbated as we speak. And the wars are not merely those that are fought on the battlefields, but on tariffs and in the mines and in corporate boardrooms. So when we look at the future of boards and getting our boards future ready, I think the first significant and the foremost aspect that we need to be cognizant of today in this VUCA world is the global uncertainties that engulf us. We live in a world where geography has become history, courtesy technology, and we are all intertwined, we are all interrelated, we are all interdependent. The shenanigans emerging from the Oval Office in White House, we are all very well aware of how it's impacting us. Every board across the globe, and this is sector agnostic, is deeply impacted by this. When you look at how things are going to be unfolding, the risk appetite of companies has been whetted to an extent that is unimaginable. Not since COVID have corporate boards been exposed to so much of a risk as they are being exposed today. The Boardroom Bellwether survey in the UK, conducted by the Chartered Governance Institute on the FTSE companies, clearly states that over 70% of boards now believe that they have a significant risk exposure, and global uncertainties, people and management, and cybersecurity in the era of artificial intelligence are the most significant risks that they are being exposed to. Diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG, sustainability, and regulation. These are all imperatives that all boards are cognizant of and have been working with over the years. DEI has taken a little bit of a tapering. It has lost a bit of its steam, if not its sheen, again owing to the shenanigans from the Oval Office in White House. But then let me assure you that the future boards, the boards of the future, must essentially have diversity, not merely in terms of gender or nationality, but more importantly in terms of thought diversity. I think it is this thought diversity which is germane to the effective and efficient functioning of boards. If I have to sum it and put it in a nutshell, I'd recall the words of Alfred Lord Tennyson in Ulysses when he says, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. What this means for future corporate boards and us governance professionals is strive amidst uncertainty, seek with foresight, find opportunity, and never yield to complacency. Thank you.
Fabulous. Lucinda, over to you.
So, first of all, also a big thank you to ICSI for inviting me to come and speak with you today, and it's a delight to be here. And for everyone who's travelled to Sydney for this conference, my lovely home city, welcome. It's fantastic to see you all here, and I'm very glad that we've put on some pretty decent weather for you, although probably a little bit chillier than some might be used to, but it's still better than perhaps you might get in some of our other cities. Talking to a colleague who's in Melbourne, and in the Sydney weather is generally somewhat better. But to talk away from the weather and on to the advertised subject matter. So I'd like to make a few points reflecting my background and perspective, thinking about both the law and the perspective of regulators. So standing back from things, fundamentally, really the duties, the obligations and the requirements imposed on boards hasn't changed. So it's still requirements to act in good faith, act in the best interests of the company, act with due care, skill and diligence, and act for a proper purpose. But that said, we have to look at this wider context in which companies and their directors are operating. So, and again, you're going to hear, I think, these words repeated not just throughout this discussion, but throughout this conference, is, of course, this is a much, much more complex and uncertain environment that boards are operating in. Stakeholder expectations, be they investors, regulators, governments and others, are increasingly heightened. And so we've got geopolitical uncertainty, technological advancements that people are sort of running to keep track of and understand where both the opportunities and the risks are. We've got trade shocks, supply disruption, and significant regulatory complexity and burden. Boards need to manage to oversee companies' compliance and risk governance in this incredibly shifting environment, and also navigate the very overlapping and complex rules that regulators and governments continue to impose upon them. There's a quote that was in the Australian Financial Review, which is one of our key newspapers here in Australia, just this morning, which highlights the need for urgent regulatory simplification here in Australia. So the quote goes that the Corporations Act, which sets the legal framework for the formation, the operation and governance of companies, has doubled in length to more than 4,000 pages and over 800,000 words since it was enacted in 2001. That makes it longer than Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, which comes in at a mere 550,000 words. So we've got key stakeholders are calling for changes to board composition, director uplift, and also reforms to director tenure. So we've seen the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, or ASIC, saying that boards need more expertise in key areas, so technology, cybersecurity, AI, and climate risk, because there's seen to be a real gap in capability and knowledge there. The Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, or APRA, is focused on overly long board tenures and also inadequate management of conflicts. We're also seeing an increasing focus on enforcement and accountability. So ASIC, the corporate conduct regulator here in Australia, is increasingly taking action against individual directors for breaches of directors' duties and misconduct. And there's also increased individual accountability for directors and executives coming out of accountability regimes. So we've got the senior managers regime in the UK, and in Australia, the Financial Executive Accountability Regime, which is administered jointly by ASIC and APRA. In this context, when you think about what being future ready requires, of course, that you need the sound cornerstones of sound governance and sound frameworks for board oversight. But to me, it requires, of course, so much more. You need boards actively engaging with management, asking questions, challenging, probing, and looking ahead. Importantly, I think future-ready boards need to be constantly scanning the horizon for opportunities and threats. And I think they're going to need to have directors who are curious, seek to extend themselves beyond their own areas of expertise, and, in the words of the ASIC chair, seeking to either uplift and upskill or actually recruit specifically for targeted skill sets. And we've also heard about the importance of diversity across boards, and that's across all dimensions. But most importantly, it's around making sure that each board is well equipped with the right set of different skills and experience, perspectives and mindsets to actually bring about robust and effective governance. And last but not least, let's not forget the role of the chair. So every board is only as good as the strength of its chair. And so they need a strong, capable and experienced chair who's adept at both setting the agenda but also leading the discussion around the board table. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dinesh, if I can have your perspective, please.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah, I thank you, Institute, for giving me the opportunity to share Singapore's view on future board. In Singapore, the future board, mostly right now, they are all concerned about the AML side. So even if you are seeing the news in last 2 years, you are seeing most of the AML violations is there, and the government is taking action against each one. The regulatory side, it's compulsory to have local director, and that is mandatory from the Accra side. So any company will have local one individual, and that individual is liable for any wrongdoing or actions which is happening within the company. The Future Ready Board, from the Singapore perspective, I say most of the Singaporeans having expertise working abroad and all. So diversity is much more available locally, and many of the government boards or private companies, larger companies board, if you observe, there are a lot of diplomats and foreign experience person is available in Singapore. So that's the diversity I see which is available locally on the Singapore perspective side.
Thank you, sir. Very insightful. The business landscape, as we see, has evolved. As a result, the role of governance professionals has evolved from being purely compliance-focused to more of a strategic enabler. Now, governance professionals are now expected to be strategic advisors that support the board in navigating complexity, disruption, and opportunity. And you've wonderfully covered the Australian perspectives on what a future-ready board looks like, and from a Singapore perspective, what a future-ready board is expected, or how they are expected to perform, right? I would want to have some more insights from the three of you on, my apologies, on how does that expectation translate into practice from an Australian perspective, from a Singapore perspective, and from an India perspective. And if you can add some insights on that, please. Lucinda? Yeah,
sure. Thank you. So, and thinking particularly from an Australian perspective, and what are the expectations of the regulators in Australia, because what we've observed, obviously regulators are always very focused on boards and the effectiveness of directors, but I think we've never seen such an intensified focus of the regulators, of the role of boards and indeed individual directors. So just even by way of an anecdote, and a lot of the time it's come out of breaches of anti-money laundering obligations, whereby what's happened is that the Financial Crimes Regulator, the Australian Transaction Reporting Authority, has taken significant action and imposed huge fines on organisations where they've breached their AML CTF requirements. Then they've been hit with litigation by the conduct regulator, ASIC, the Australian Securities Investments Commission, which has pursued the boards for breaches of their directors' duties that gave rise to those breaches of the anti-money laundering obligations. And so at the moment we've had quite a significant case where we're awaiting judgment, and that was against individual directors as well as the General Counsel, which as a former General Counsel myself is a very terrifying thought, for breaches of duties that gave because of these AML CTF breaches. So that was in the case of the Star Casino, and so we're awaiting judgment on that matter. So the long and short of it is this really matters. So the regulators here in Australia, both ASIC and APRA, have very, very strong views about what boards need to do to get the foundations right in the first place. So, of course, first of all, effective governance. So they need strong governance, which is fundamental both to prudential, so safety as well as conduct regulation, sound risk management, and importantly, that's going to make institutions much more resilient to risks and shocks that will emerge. Secondly, aligned to that, they've got to prevent weaknesses. So boards are expected to identify issues of poor conduct, with poor governance, because of these tend to lead, if not remedied, to misconduct, losses and failures, followed by, of course, regulatory action. Leadership is the third aspect, which is so important. So high calibre leadership. Boards need to be comprised of highly skilled, high integrity, skilled leaders capable of managing risk and governing effectively. Fourthly, they need to focus on non-financial risk just as much as they're focusing on financial risk. And hence we're seeing an increased focus on areas such as governance, culture, remuneration and accountability. Boards really need to continue to prioritise these areas because we're seeing more and more regulatory action against organisations where they fall short there. They need to address, sixth of all, known weaknesses in key areas. So we've talked about director skills and capabilities. So making sure they have the right expertise across key areas such as cybersecurity, AI, global supply chains, and increasingly what we're seeing is major institutional investors, not just the regulators, are calling for uplift in this space. They need better approaches to assessing fitness and propriety, doing board performance assessments, and also dealing with issues arising from overly long board tenure. And last but not least, they need a proactive risk culture. So they need to foster a strong risk culture. And what does that look like? It might be undertaking regular risk assessments, risk culture surveys, boards then interrogating the results of those and really committing to action plans to improve. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Patti, over to you.
So this can be viewed from multiple perspectives. One is, of course, the critical regulatory angle to it. The second is some of the other key stakeholders, and I'll touch upon it in a minute. And then there is a larger strata of society segments which are vicariously or indirectly connected with the way corporate boards and companies function. I'll start with the regulatory aspects first. The Companies Act of 2013, which replaced a decades-old act of 1956, was a watershed moment in India's corporate annals. It significantly changed the way companies were functioning. It was more management by exception, penalties were slashed, and greater emphasis was given on self-regulation, self-certification, and increased accountability and responsibility on the part of both boards of directors as well as governance professionals and other audit practitioners. So the Companies Act, which replaced the previous one, was a significant enabler, and the last 10, 12 years have been proof enough of the way things have panned out in the Indian context. The ease of doing business has certainly improved, has significantly improved. Red tapeism has been cut to a large extent, and full credit to the government led by our visionary Mr. Narendra Modi for spearheading this and taking this forward. In the case of listed companies, the SEBI also altered the regulation surrounding them. The erstwhile listing agreement, which was said to be lacking in teeth, was replaced by a more robust listing obligation and disclosure requirement regulation, which again emphasized more on governance and laid the responsibility of ensuring compliance with the managements of the respective companies. The boards, as Lucinda briefly mentioned, there's increased emphasis on having diversity and skills on the boards. It is no longer possible to perfunctorily appoint an independent director simply because he or she qualifies a certain set of conditions. There are a set of skills that need to be clearly articulated by a company, disclosed as part of its filings, and an explanation to be provided as to how each director fits into that matrix. So there is a skill that is needed. There are basic skills that are required for a company, and it is incumbent upon the company now to articulate as to how the directors fulfill those skills. The second aspect that I would like to touch upon is also the role of some of the support institutions or the ancillary institutions, including our own company secretaries and the Institute of Chartered Accountants. The audit professionals also need to be audited, and the governance professionals also need governance for themselves. So you have secretarial standards now which have got mandatory recognition. The Act of 2013 makes it mandatory for all sorts of companies to comply with secretarial standards, and there are codes of conduct that are now in place to ensure the proper functioning of the governance professionals, and pretty much the same applies to the audit professionals from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And then I also said that there is a peripheral third aspect where the stakeholders are concerned. For the very first time in the Indian corporate history, you have this concept of CSR, or corporate social responsibility, that was introduced. The jury is still out. It's 10 years since it's been rolled out. The jury is still out, as I said, whether it's appropriate for the government to be levying an additional duty, an additional tax, so to say, on corporates, because social responsibility is essentially the domain of the government. So is it an indirect admission of a shortcoming from the government itself that it has to tap into corporate resources over and above what is already being taxed? So that's another critical point. Be that as it may, the fact is that we live in a world where corporates of certain size and certain categories are mandatorily required to spend a certain amount on an annual basis for discharging their corporate social responsibilities. The last point that I would like to touch upon, and this is going to become increasingly significant in the years to come. This was unheard of even about 10 years ago, but with electronic voting becoming a reality, shareholders from across the globe can now vote and participate and vote in meetings, general meetings of companies, and postal ballots which are held between two general meetings. And the role of the proxy advisory firms is going to be under increasing scrutiny in the years to come. While they have their own set of internal guidelines, it is by and large a stakeholder of the corporate sector that still remains unregulated, which remains out of the periphery, and this is something that we will have to cogitate in the months and years to come.
Couldn't agree more, sir. And especially living and breathing the Australian corporate governance world, there is a lot of similarities, and I would say lucky to be in the profession right now. Dinesh, over to you from a Singapore perspective.
Yeah. So more or less the regulations in Australia and Singapore are similar. The regulatory authorities are different. Like in India, we have RBI, income tax, GST, and different authorities. In Singapore, for all taxation purpose, it is IRS. It's one organization. Second, like ROC or Ministry of Corporate Affairs, we have in Singapore is ACRA. And the third is like RBI, we have MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore. So these three authorities are governing most of the organizations in Singapore. And the requirement is like all the boards like across the globe is similar, but certain things they are asking is specific, that AML is non-negotiable, non-compromise. So most of the times, even if you are a company secretary and you are onboarding any of the customers, it is your duty to cross-check and confirm the AML side and KYC. Like in India, we don't have as a regulatory confirmations to be done by company secretary when they are onboarding, chartered accountant also when they are onboarding the customer or a client, they don't do AML check. Whereas in Singapore, whether it is chartered accountant, company secretary or lawyer or even a banker, anybody they are onboarding as a client, it is compulsory to do the KYC. So that's the regulatory requirement which is changing on a certain country to country. I'm not sure about the Australia side on the AML check for the company secretaries. Board side, the ESG is the another part which is very much in talk during last 2 to 3 years in Singapore after COVID. A lot of changes has happened on ESG implementation, and if you see many of the listed companies have started ESG implementation seriously. The another side is there is no much manufacturing in Singapore, so the pollution and other side information is very, very rare. But still, wherever they have the subsidiary companies across the globe, there they are supposed to report in the Singapore reporting also. So that is the changes which I wanted to add along with the Australian changes. Like.
Absolutely. Dr. Patti, over to you now, just having a bit of a track change. So a future-ready board is a learning and evolving board, one that embraces change, particularly the mood music nowadays, which is AI and digital disruption, which is reshaping every sector that we work in. So I am keen to hear how can, from your perspective, the boards evolve to stay ahead of this change and be future-ready?
So as I said, the Boardroom Bellwether survey in the UK also came out with a very similar finding. And this is reflective of what boards across the globe would be feeling in terms of the technology disruption that is happening. AI is, of course, here to stay. It's not merely a buzzword. It's something like what corporate governance has been or what ESG and DEI have been over the last few decades. And I'm sure AI is going to overtake all of them. And it's still a black box to a large number of people here. Our exposure to a large extent is restricted to Perplexity or to ChatGPTs as we speak. But then the future of business, the future indeed lies in AI, in technology, and that is going to be massive disruption. The kind of disruption that has not been seen in the past. And while there is, of course, this paranoia of any change, there is the resistance to change that is obviously going to happen in any given circumstances. I think this is going to be yet the single largest change, the metamorphosis that the corporate sector is going to see, at least in a century. AI is going to be changing the way our lives are going to be led. specifically from a corporate secretarial or from a corporate landscape perspective, I think a lot of companies have started putting in place codes and policies on technology, on artificial intelligence, and how it is going to impact them, how they will be in a position to leverage, or how it's going to be a challenge for them as they continue to roll on with their business. And again, this is something which is sector agnostic, whether you're in the banking, services, manufacturing, no matter what sector you are in, AI is going to impact you in a big, big way. A lot of companies have also started having board level oversight in terms of setting up committees to oversee the impact of artificial intelligence and technology, how it's going to impact, and what are the ways, what is the way forward for them. I must also strike a note of caution. Artificial intelligence is like that precocious intern who's the latest addition to our team. Bright, resourceful, ambitious, full of bubble and verve, very versatile, vivacious, and use all the adjectives. But then it's an intern whose work you would not allow to go unsupervised, whose output you would not publish unverified.
If only I could use a fraction of these words in my board minutes. Lucinda, let's bring it home purely from, so being a general counsel for a regulator in the past and now a partner at a law firm, what areas should the boards keep their sharpest focus on from what Dr. Patiya said in the digital disruption standpoint, especially from a regulatory obligation perspective?
Thank you. So I'll refer back to the chair of ASIC, so Australia's Securities and Markets Regulator, because this is something he's had a lot to say about, and I think he will continue to have a lot to say about it. So first of all, when he's talked about his view about directors' roles and responsibilities in this really evolving landscape, first of all, he goes back to kind of first principles. So number one, the legal framework around directors' duties, expectations of boards hasn't changed. So that's what we're operating in. That's really important to remember. That said, even though you can't get distracted from that, and at this stage in Australia, then there's no immediate plans to renovate our whole legislative framework in light of the evolution of AI, cyber risks, and this incredibly rapid pace of technological change. I think overall the legislature's perspective is we're going to sort of sit back, see how it fits within the existing regulatory and legislative framework, and then see what, if anything, needs to be changed. I'm sure the tune will change in due course, and then they'll be scrambling to catch up, but that's where we're at the moment. But when we think about what boards need to deal with this landscape, again, ASIC's chair's quite deliberate and explicit about what he thinks it's needed. He said there's a need to increase technical expertise on boards, and they actually need much more effective reporting on these sorts of issues from management. So from ASIC's perspective, there isn't a single issue that's facing businesses and institutions more generally that doesn't require good data, really good data, good systems and processes, including IT systems and technology, to enable them to address those issues. And so I think organisations that don't actively try to keep ahead of this, or if not ahead of this, at least catch up with this space, see what it means, how it might affect their sector, do so at your own peril. I think the other piece that's coming out very clearly in this context, and no doubt in other jurisdictions, is regulators are increasingly unforgiving for organisations who have a lack of IT and cyber resilience. So this is where they have events that affect the organisation's own operations. And so, for instance, in Australia earlier this year, we had a number of cyber attacks that affected members of superannuation funds, and some people did lose some of their money. That's something that regulators look very, very closely at, both, again, the conduct and the prudential regulator, to really test how robust and resilient are those organisation systems, number one, and then how quickly and appropriately did they respond to these issues, including communication to affected customers, other stakeholders and regulators. So it's just an indication of, I think, there's huge opportunity, but gosh, there's so much for organisations, boards and directors to be managing to try to stay across and indeed, if they can, ahead of. Thank you.
Thank you. Dineshji, as a business owner that operates in two highly regulated jurisdictions, what is your take in practice on how you've seen resilient boards have been so far in managing the pace of this regulatory and technology change? And what separates a resilient board from the one that struggles?
So it's very challenging. Both the
Chatham House rules, by the way.
So Singapore and India, if you see both the countries has a different regulations. If on the perspective from the board side, I say Singapore is much lesser on compliances side, because there is a set of governance which is written and you have to comply with that only. Whereas in India, like you see the ESG side, every area there is a regulation. So that Dr. Patti said that you need to be resilient with all its, I think it's humanly impossible, and that's why the AI is coming into picture, that how that can assist the board. Whereas in Singapore, like it's a structured thing. So if you are violating the structure, you are like not going further. So most of the companies in Singapore, they are right now focusing on cybersecurity, ESG, AML. These three are the key guidelines for not to violate, because all the regulations are looking into that. And when if you see the other side on India, where certain even the legislation changes also affecting the companies, like the gaming law. So that is sudden change. But if I can say the board is vigilant, it is not a sudden. Like last 3 months, the discussion was going on in the parliament that certain things are going to change. So if the board are powerful and have some foresight to see even the regulation change, you can avoid certain problems. Some companies have taken advantage also, like say if you see Paytm during the note banning, the Paytm has come out overnight with a digital payment gateway, and other companies are also there in that particular time, but Paytm took the first mover advantage, and overnight the board meeting happens and they come out with a plan to action out within a week, roll out the entire package in India. So I see from the board's perspective, if you are resilient, you need to change very fast and have some foresight. So any law changes is not like overnight. So most of the time you see in the Indian newspaper, they say overnight so many gaming companies are out and all. But it's not overnight. At least 3 months before you are aware that the regulation is going to come. And if you can prepare that, so if you see the Dream 11, they might have prepared, which I think so, because they come out with the fintech evolution immediately. So they instead of gaming, they started offering to the customer or a member the fintech solution. So I see the board, if the board is ready, probably they can come out with a different solution at a different juncture of the growth of the company.
Thank you, sir. Now, tuning to another topic here, and one for Dineshji and Dr. Patti. From a geopolitical risk, war scenario, or trade disruption perspective, what have you seen the boards do to prepare for and respond to such events? And Lucinda, if you may add your perspective as a GC or as from a law firm perspective in terms of what you see in the Australian market, please. Dr. Patti.
So as I said at the outset, geopolitical risks are vital, and that's the fulcrum on which most of the corporate boards are functioning today. Every single decision that they take is in one or the other way hinged on these geopolitical risks. Looking at it historically, how do boards manage this, or how are boards going to be managing this going forward? I think one key aspect is the risk management committee that you have in the Indian context. I know it sounds a little academic, but then it has its own values. Large companies and listed companies in the Indian context are required to have a risk management committee, have a formal ERM framework to evaluate, understand, and mitigate the risks. And geopolitical risks, believe me, are top of the charts in every single company. While that's at the overall organizational level, at every single individual transaction level as well, there are imperatives that boards do need to take. For instance, ensuring that the local associates are hired from the geographies concerned, ensuring that people are being vocal for local, as is being said in the Indian context. The supply chains are actively engaged in the local context. And one thing that I have realized from personal experience also is in the context of mergers and amalgamations, when M&A transactions happen, there's a lot of time spent in terms of ensuring synergies or growth on opportunities, on business expansion, on customer penetration, on geography expansion, and so on. But some of the subtler and softer aspects of cultural integration, of getting the people on board, particularly when you have cross-border transactions, I think that's a subtle aspect that often tends to get ignored. So this cultural integration is something that will go a long way in ensuring that geopolitical risks are mitigated. It's a multi-pronged approach. I know there is no single solution to it. It has to evolve by trial and error. But then these are perhaps some thoughts that I have on this.
Thank you, sir. Dineshji, over to you.
Yeah. So geopolitical risk is going to stay, and it will be like you need to eminent with the different approach. So from my perspective, I see if we can get the experts. I'm not saying geopolitical experts is available, but most of the time you find ambassador or the ex-diplomats are available, and you can hire their services, or they can be a board member. So that is one of the approach which, if you see the Singapore company, many of the board members are either the civil servants, those who are retired civil servants, or diplomats. So they have majority of the experience in different countries and different areas, and they play a vital role when certain such decisions has to be taken. So that is one way of, I can say, mitigating the geopolitical risk, which any company can go for it.
Thank you. Lucinda?
Look, I think from the Australian perspective, everything that Dr. Putty said and Dinesh has had to say holds true. So making sure that boards are having those right risk frameworks where geopolitical risk is right up there as a core area of focus, making sure that as Dinesh said, you're not necessarily going to have former diplomats on the board itself, but making sure you have access to the right experts and insights, making sure that you are talking to your regulators about how you're thinking about these things, because of course they are speaking to their international counterparts about global trends and issues, and so making sure you're tapping in to all that network of perspectives and insights and best practice globally, I think is incredibly important. And I think in recognition of the significance of geopolitical risk as just something that is sadly a BAU risk now, it's here to stay. We've seen regulators in Australia and no doubt elsewhere, again, putting that at the forefront of their current corporate plans that they're issuing. So APRA has put geopolitical risk right up there, same with ASIC. That is something they are very focused on about, what are the risks to the Australian system and what do they expect of Australian companies to be able to manage and be aware of those risks.
Thank you, Lucinda. AI, tech disruption, geopolitics, they are such topics that we can go days and days discussing on it without any end. That said, time is limited. We have 10 more minutes allocated. Why don't we open up the floor for questions? If anyone, do we have a moving mic here? Do anyone in the audience have any questions? You can use mine. That's fine.
This is to Dr. Putty. You spoke about AI. Would ancient intelligence, which is people who are thinking, survive this onslaught of artificial intelligence inside the boardroom? Yeah, and then to Lucinda, I observe that public sector in Australia have better gender diversity than private sectors. Where do you see women leaders in the years to come in Australian boards?
To answer your question straight away, the human intervention, the human mind can never be replaced. NEVER, it can never be replaced. So that's a given. If I have to paraphrase the words of Dr. Johnson, which he of course said in the context of some legislation, artificial intelligence also can be adequate. It can never be complete. So the human intervention will never go away. If you go back about 30, 40 years, and we have none other than somebody like Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, the former Vice President of India, who went public with his remark. And he said that he believed that when information technology came into India, computers came to India for the first time in the late 70s and early 80s, he thought that humans, Indian citizens will lose all jobs and computers will take over everything. The reality today is far from it. The future is not for us to see, and yet I'd hold my horses to say that human intelligence, human endeavor, human interference can never be done away with.
Can I add to that, if I may? And this is again my personal opinion, which is AI is a fantastic tool. So the way I see it as a corporate governance professional is a tool that makes my work, my life efficient. It's purely efficiency. So not just for the people in the room, but our colleagues, our students, our delegates sitting in India, my personal opinion is I'm not worried. I'm happy. I'm happy because it makes my work much better, more efficient, at least for now. And I think, as Dr. Patti has said, AI hasn't evolved yet to the extent that it can replace human intuition, human common sense, and human adaptability as such.
If I might just add, a fool with a tool is still a fool. What you do with the tool is more important than what the tool itself is. A blade in the hands of a madman can cause mayhem, and the blade in the hands of a seasoned surgeon can give life. I rest my case.
Okay, so turning to the second part of this gentleman's just question. So thank you, sir. It's a great question. It's quite confronting because, and it's very true. I think if we think about gender diversity in the public sector and particularly at senior levels, in the Australian experience is far, far better than yet what we see in the private sector. If I reflect even on the organisation where I worked most recently, APRA, the Prudential Regulation Authority, of the executive board members, male chair, 3 female board members, and again next layer down, 50-50 between male and female senior leaders, which is fantastic. Turning to the private sector, we just still seem to have this ceiling. So if you think about law firms, you think about senior executives in large corporations, and then going up to boards. You know, we're lucky if we're sort of averaging around 30% at best, and it's still something. Even I was at an event for International Women's Day, and the CEO of Macquarie Bank, a woman, trailblazer, was speaking, and she was talking about even at Macquarie the work they're trying to do to bring more capable, really talented women through the ranks of the organisation to senior levels, but they're still not getting where they need to be. So I'm sorry I don't have any of the answers, but I'm just playing back to you the problem, apart from the fact that whether it's in the public sector, there's much more rigorous adherence to quotas to push through gender diversity. But yeah, that's a conversation for another day. Thank you.
Yeah, just as Lucinda was just mentioning about some of the pension funds in Australia, you face the problem of some attacks, cyber attacks. We in India also do have these kind of problems like ransomware attacks. What to say, ICSI itself faced last 2 years back a big ransomware attack where we just got lost the data for say 2-3 hours. Nothing big happened, but even we had a data center Even that ransomware attack could not be protected having a data center. So though we had luckily a second, option of having some tapes which were running. Why I'm asking this question is, when we speak about resilient board, do you think first the board needs to understand that they are vulnerable in spite of having so many systems in place? Some kind of an education to the board. Is it not necessary from the governance professionals' point of view that board, sometimes what happens, I have seen in many corporations that board feels that they have systems in place, why does this risk take place? Thank you.
Happy to take that one. Look, absolutely. I mean, I think the regulators would accept that despite the best efforts in the world, there will be successful attacks. You know, given the ingenuity, the speed, the way which these scams evolve, all these bad actors out there, things will get through. So then what's critical is, that's right, how do boards and other professionals respond? And so that goes to having, you know, the right planning in place, the right, actually going through drills, you know, having the playbooks, having access to the experts, you know, running through that kind of, you know, disaster recovery and planning scenarios and working that muscle. Every organisation needs to do that, to at least be prepared to deal with the bad things when they happen, not if.
A scamster needs to be successful only once, whereas an organization needs to be successful every single time.
And I think to add to your answer on board training, I think that is the new normal. You know, as governance professionals, like my view and my experience has been, gone are the days when you were the company secretary sitting on the side of the table. You are front and center. You are part of that strategic advisory team that supports the board in being at their best and protecting the board's best interest and the enterprise's best interest. So I think, I mean, again, I'm proud to say that now, you know, the jack of all trades is a matter of pride for me in that regards, because I think what a privileged position to be in, where you are the strategic advisor, you have the foresight to look into the risk aspects, the tech aspects. You might not be the SME, but looking at who can provide that support to your board. I think there was a question at the back.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for the enriching discussions you had. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shalab Narayan. The question I have is, and I'll build on the three things that was said by these two gentlemen over here and by yourself. A fool with a tool is still a fool. The problem is the world is filled up of fool, you know, including me. So no offenses to anybody. The question is, what is the role of the board today when the technology is changing at a lightning pace? And when I look at the businesses, most of the time, the CIOs are not directly reporting into the board. The programs they are taking are very different from what the expectations are. AI, ML, like it or don't like it, they are there in the systems. Every organization, large organization, is at this moment of time, every department is running an AI, ML program. The underlying basis of all this is data. How does the board ensure that the hallucination or the biases of the AI programs that are happening, it will not happen? Which brings me to the point that you just mentioned in terms of the technical education of the people at the board level. I mean, look, everybody at the board is at least 45 or 50 years plus. I mean, no offenses there again on the age factor. But then the learning ability of us in terms of, I mean, if you look at our children, the way they handle the technology, we often learn from them. I mean, I'm not able to change my operating system from an Android to an iPhone just because of the change management. I hate when my daughter comes to me with her Apple laptop because I can't use her Apple laptop. So how does the board ensure that they are at least aware of what programs are happening so that the biases underlying the data, which creates the end of the line business discussions or actions, are sane at least? I mean, we can assume to be sane. Sorry for the long question.
No. The short answer is there is no magic pill. And the short answer is by asking the right question. So I think, well, we can't discount the fact that AI, tech is an evolving sector. So as a corporate governance professional, what should I be looking at? Working with my board chair hand in hand to try and fill that skill gap on the board to gradually uplift it. That's one aspect. The other aspect I'd be looking at is if the directors on the board who doesn't have that level of expertise, they would still have the foresight to ask the right question to the expert in the room, i.e. management. And it's not a band-aid approach, right? It'll evolve as the landscape does. Dineshji or Dr. Patti or Lucinda?
So, as Dhaval said, it's when you see the board, most of the time the board is relied on the expertise of the management, and company secretary being the first person who is available on the board. So the role what company secretaries can play during education or enrichment of information to the board is much more critical, as Dhaval said.
Thank you.
We are on time, if it's okay. This shall be the last question. But if you have any more questions, please grab us during the tea break. I think I would personally like to thank Dr. Patti, Lucinda, Dineshji for such an insightful conversation. Okay, let's take the last question, sir.
Picking up from where my colleague here said, one of the important requirements on the part of board today is to be agile. Agility, you talked about diversity. I think agility is an important feature. If you look at the last 2 decades, starting with global financial crisis, followed by Eurozone crisis, situation arising out of Brexit, and then we come down to COVID, and then the wars that we have and the geopolitical turmoil that we now have today. So you need to be a serial crisis handler, handling one crisis after another, and one crisis could be very totally different from the other crisis. And if the environment is in a state of flux, the question is how far ahead you can look in future. And if you can't look that far ahead in future, how can you engage in long-term planning? That is the biggest challenge that we are facing today. The other thing, you look at the multilateral framework of trade, a rule-based trade regime, it is not producing anything today, The Doha round of negotiation has also not got concluded as of now. So we are turning more and more to regional trade blocs or bilateral trade agreements. And they are turning more and more WTO plus and WTO minus. That means the issues that we cannot handle in WTO are now being taken up at bilateral level or in the regional trade blocs. For example, competition and investments. There is no agreement within the WTO, barring only slight agreement that we have within the General Agreement on Trade and Services with regard to investments. Otherwise, we are relying more on bilateral treaties, or you have some part of it, being addressed in the regional trade blocs. So keeping all these things in mind, I think it is very important for the boards today to be agile, to be able to quickly adopt to the changes. That is the one remark, I wanted to make. It is not a question and it is not addressed to any one of the panelists.
I'll just build upon that with the permission of the chair. Very apt analysis, very apt summarization of what needs to be done. I'll just add to that. Agile here is not merely an adjective, but I would believe it's more an acronym. And each letter of agile would actually stand for one board action: ambition, growth, investment, leadership, and execution. I think when these 5 are combined and boards are alive to these, no matter what circumstances emerge, how difficult the turmoil that needs to be faced, I think with these 5 principles in place, it should be possible for any vibrant board to be able to overcome. I'll just close it off with a dialogue from a Hindi movie. For those of you who've grown on Bollywood from the mid-1990s, there was an Amitabh movie called Khuda Gawah, and there's a one-liner from there, an all-time favorite of mine. Sorry, Lucinda, I'll explain this to you. आजमाइश कड़ी है, इम्तिहान मुश्किल है, लेकिन हौसला बुलंद है. So that's on that note.
Fabulous, fabulous. On that amazing quote, once again, my personal thanks to my fellow panelists. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for your insightful questions. I'll pass it on to my dear host here.
Thank you, everyone, for the insightful session. I would now request CS Manish Kia, the former chair IOCA, to present a memento to our speakers as a token of appreciation.
discuss